For this tutorial, I'm using 4mm natural rope. It's jute and it's slightly less in diameter than normal rope, which is about 6mm. I find it better for this sort of work. It leaves a nicer, cleaner aesthetic. If you're struggling with this sort of work at all or following this tutorial, I'd recommend getting synthetic rope like paracord. Synthetic rope has a much more reliable and consistent structure, whereas something like jute with use and storage tends to kink and it actually resists where you put it. I've been thinking for a while how best to do this tutorial, whether to use synthetic or natural, and I've decided to use natural rope because that's how I learned. When I first learned things like the coin knot, I really struggled because I was following people who are using paracord and things like that, and I couldn't translate that from that material to this very easily. So hopefully, regardless of what type of rope you're using, if you follow this tutorial, where I lay my hands and how I position myself, you'll be able to approach it in the same way from start to finish. Also note that this rope is doubled up. For this design, I got one length of rope, folded it in half, and found the midpoint. But for this tutorial, we're going to work with a single strand, find that midpoint, and start with there. Okay, once you've found your midpoint, make 3 counterclockwise loops. 1, 2, and 3. Should look like this. Now, cross your left running end over the right running end, like this. Okay, now you want to take the new right hand running end and you want to weave it underneath this line and over this line, resting it behind these in that direction. Because this rope is so long, it's 10 meters. Ideally I'd be using something shorter, but I don't want to cut this because I really like it. What I'm doing here is rather than getting the end and poking it through, I'm just making a little bite to push through the rope and make things much easier. Rather than showing you how to do it with the end of the rope, I think it's much better to get into the practice of approaching it like this. You should end up with something that looks like that. Now, hold everything in place, ensure that that loop doesn't undo itself. Take this end, with this positioned in the middle, and work over this one, under this one, over, under, over. With this sort of weaving pattern, it's very easy to troubleshoot and see where you've gone wrong. If you've gone over twice or under twice, you know that's the point you need to go back to solve the problem. This actually happens with a lot of decorative stuff. And looking at this design, actually, I've noticed that there's not a single point at which it goes under twice. This actually completes the Trinity knot at this point, and you should be sorted. If I neaten this up, you'll be able to see how it looks. Okay, it should look like that. When I snug everything down, I just do one section at a time. If you pull the whole thing, you get confused, it looks like you've dropped spaghetti, so keep things organized. Now we want to extend this loop up, so remembering this is the midpoint, feed one of the lines through and extend that up to about here. Okay, things should look like this. If it does, invert it, turn the whole thing around, like this. It creates a nice heart pattern here, and that's quite a good way of knowing that you've got it right at this point. Now, work these 2 lines up, high up to the top. You want that cross that they form here to be fairly high up. Saves you a bit of work later. Okay, like that. Now invert these lines so that this one is below here and this one is above, but keep that over that. Hold everything in place and do one at a time. Okay. At this point, things should look like this. Now, this line is going to go around, over this, behind it, and in front of itself. That would look like this. Pull it up to the top. Tighten it up there. Like that. Now this side is going to do a similar thing. It's going to go around here and underneath itself there. I'll pull this through and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, tighten this design up at this point by bringing these up to here. If you end up like that, just remember it's coming downwards. Try and keep it flat. Okay, it should look like this. Now, put this side across to here, like that. And bring this side, which has gone under here, over to this side. Like that. If you're struggling here, where it gets more complex, just check you're going over and under. Now this comes under this line. Okay, should look like this at this point. Now, carefully rotate the bottom loop that way round. Hold that in place and try and make this loop large. So you're going to operate in the middle of it in a sec. Take your right hand side and leave it over like that. Just like you did earlier when you finished the Trinity knot. Now take this side. You're going to do a final weave which goes under, over and under. This bit needs a bit of wrestling. Give it a go. Okay, you'll be left with something that looks a bit like this. Now you just need to snug everything down, starting with this point here. That was your midpoint. So you pull this section through, and work all your way around until it's tight. Depending on the type of rope you're using, this design looks best with a larger open structure or tight. I think because this rope is quite kinked, it actually looks better more open. Okay, so the photogenic nature of this knot is really down to how much you play around with it at the end. When I've doubled up the rope and I'm using that sort of method, or even tripling up the rope, I actually use a pair of needle nose pliers to open spaces up and tighten things because it's quite difficult on the hands. But essentially that's it. I hope this helps. Any questions, please ask.